Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week. And this is a show where I review all the comics I read this week in one show, going least favorite to best pick of the week. So let's get started. I had about 12 books this week, which is my semi-average of a list here. So number 12 for me is Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man issue 13. So I think I'm gonna drop this book, sadly. I am a Tom Taylor fan, but I just don't really know what direction the book's going in. And I feel like it embraces the friendly neighborhood aspect a little bit too much, which makes it feel very one-shot and not important to the overall Spider-Man mythos. And you know, there's so many Spider-Man titles out there, so many titles in general. I think this one is skippable. And also, not really a big fan of the artwork. It feels very rushed to me, and honestly, the whole book kind of feels very rushed in general. And, you know, we get a simple Fantastic Four Spider-Man team up, but I just don't care about the events that they're going through and the characters they interact with. It's just not really interesting to me, and that's been every plot since, honestly, the beginning of this series. There's been little stories like, okay, Spider-Man's dying, what's gonna happen there? Mary Jane's becoming Spider-Man, what? And it always just ends up on the lackluster side. So Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man issue 13 gets 1.5 stars, and that is number 12. Moving on to number 11, another Spider-Man book actually, and that is Goblin Red Death issue 1. I like this variant, but I feel like it's weird. Spider-Man's pinky looks like dislocated in the cover, but overall, cover looks cool. Actually, it's a gatefold cover right there. I didn't even notice that until just now. But anyways, Goblin Red Death. So with this issue, I didn't really know what to expect with it, because I'm like, do we need a Red Goblin issue? Like, how much are they going to dive into his story? Especially because it's just so connected to what's going in Amazing Spider-Man right now. We got issues with Norman in the Absolute Carnage tie-in with the Amazing Spider-Man. It seems like his story is really tied to Kindred, because I think it's Harry Osborn who's Kindred. So how much can you do in this one shot? Will it really affect the Amazing Spider-Man? And the answer is no, not at all. This definitely feels like a cash grab to me. The first half, you get to see Norman kind of have morals, which is weird. He's a supervillain. I don't want to see Norman have morals in that way. And Carnage seems to be attacking people that are bad, which is weird. It's Carnage. He should be attacking anybody that comes his way. And that's the story, is that it's kind of like this horror narrative where they're hunting down people. He's a predator, and that's the story. And I like the horror aspect. I like the vibe of the book. I just thought the character motives were really weird, and again, didn't really know what the book was trying to do. I did like the artwork, though. I thought the artwork was really sleek and solid, so if you're just looking for an action-packed issue, go for it. And then we have a second story that really doesn't have to do with Red Goblins, so it just has to do with Carnage in general. I really wasn't interested in that story. And I just wish that they made this book cheaper. Just make it a regular sized book. I don't know why we needed 2 stories in here. So overall, if you need to skip a book this week, this is very skippable, in my opinion. And I believe this is a $5 book. Definitely not worth the $5 price tag for me. So giving that 2 stars, and that is a number 11. Moving on to number 10, which is, you guys might be disappointed, but Excalibur issue 1. So my mission with these X-Men books is to try everything, even ones that I might not have been interested in you know, previously. So I really wanted to give every single one a shot. And Excalibur wasn't one I was extremely excited for, because I really never read Excalibur. I've read some kiddie stuff with the comics, but I've never really dived into that series. And also, I'm not like a big King Arthur fan or magic fan by any means, so this is the fantasy X-Men book, and it's just not my thing. It's not my genre. Also, the characters that are picked here, I'm not that big of a fan of, but it's interesting to see the very different side of the X-Men that we get here. Like Jubilee isn't on this team. Then you got Apocalypse, Gambit, Rogue, and Psylocke. Now who's Captain Britain, which I guess was interesting if you're an Excalibur fan. If you're if you're a fan of that series. But yeah, the reason I picked this up also is because, like, oh, that's a really interesting mix. Like, why the hell is Apocalypse on this team? And what does this mean for, you know, the rest of the X-Men dynamics here? And the island in general. How's that going to play up? And are we going to learn more about the island? And we kind of don't. Again, it wasn't my thing. I also thought it was very thrown into different directions. First, you get to see Rogue, and then you're thrown into the Captain Britain story. There's just too much going on in this one issue for me to really enjoy it. So overall, I'm going to give this 2 stars, and probably not going to get the next issue, but glad I'm giving all the issue 1s a try. Hopefully there will be some surprises in there. Alright, moving on to number 9, which is Witchblade, issue 16. This book hasn't been the strongest, but I do like this franchise a lot, and I do still find the potential for this book, which is why I haven't dropped it. But yeah, I feel like there's too much going on. There's so many characters, I kind of lose track of who's who, and that's where you're at right now. There's like 5 different characters. I'm like, who's the villain at this point? And there are some delays for Witchblade as well, so I think it just gets so driven by its mythology that it forgets the character beats of why this book was so interesting and why Alex was so interesting. So overall, I'm going to give this 2 stars. Solid artwork, but I just hope it gets back to the more character-driven narrative. That's when the series is at its strongest. So that is number 10? What are we up to? That was number 9. So moving on to number 8. Now, I actually forgot to get this one at the comic book store, and I was debating, should I go get it next week or something? And I didn't really like the issue, so I don't think I'm going to get it. And that's Tales of the Multiverse, Death of Superman. And this actually was my most anticipated book of the week. I was really excited for it. Haven't read any of the Tales of the Multiverse stuff, but I was excited for this one especially. And obviously Blackest Night that comes out next week, because, you know, it's Blackest Night. So I was really excited for this because we get to see Lois Lane become the Superman, you know, type character, take revenge. So I'm like, that sounds cool. And what Marvel has been kind of doing with some of their Elseworld female characters like Spider-Gwen. You know, Spider-Gwen was such a hit and it put a different spin on a Spider character with one of Peter's love interests. That's honestly a disservice to Gwen, that description, but you know what I mean. It's a female character you wouldn't expect to be a Spider person and then was a big hit. So I was really excited for this. You know, we've seen Lois as a super person in the past, but I thought this was a really interesting angle and a very interesting time period in Superman's life. But I didn't like the dialogue that much. I really didn't love Lois, and, you know, I really wanted to enjoy her emotional beats because, you know, she's down and out after Superman dies, and the melodrama it didn't fit for me, and I think it would have been interesting to see a female perspective from this book, and maybe that's something that drew me out of it, because, like, I didn't know who wrote it at first, but I'm like, it doesn't really feel like a girl wrote this book, and I looked at it and it was a guy, and obviously no offense of a guy writing a female character, but for some reason, like, when I read it, I kind of wanted a female point of view for this book in particular, and you could kind of tell the voice was a bit off for this one. So, yeah, Death of Superman, I just didn't like Lois's voice for this book. I thought it was so melodramatic, and just because, yes, of course she's going to be driven by Superman, but that's her only story. Her journalism is very much a side note, and I just didn't like a lot of the beats that they end up taking with this book. I think it could have went in a really interesting direction, and it just... It didn't. It kind of wallowed in this, again, melodrama of a story. Now, I will say I did enjoy the artwork a lot. I enjoyed the 90s feel to it, and that brought it up for me a bit. But I think it's honestly lower. It's not a bad book. I do think it's interesting to see Lois back in that time and how she felt. But because I was so hyped for this book, I was like, that was kind of disappointing. I wanted to like this so much more than I ended up liking it. So overall, I'm going to give that 2.5 stars, and that's number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is Batman Annual, issue 4. And honestly, I like this issue a bit more than I have been with Batman, but at the same time, I don't know if it's really a necessary issue. It's literally just Batman's everyday, and There was no story that honestly particularly struck me, but it was cool just to hear Alfred's narrative. I thought the artwork was really good. Is it worth $4.99? I don't know, but I thought it was an interesting perspective on Batman, especially as we lead towards the end of Tom King's run. So I'm going to give this 3 stars. It's not, hey, you need to run into the store and get this, but I thought it was one of the better issues of Batman that we haven't gotten in a while. And then also it was kind of cool to hear from Alfred, because we don't know if he's dead or not, which hopefully we'll find out soon. So moving on to number 6, which is a book, honestly, I wasn't going to originally get, but I saw a preview of it. I'm like, oh, this kind of sounds cool. And then I heard a little bit more of the description. I'm like, all right, this sounds up my alley. And that's Basketful of Heads, issue 1. Honestly, this so far has been the only one I'm interested in with the Hill House comics, but who knows, maybe I'll give another one a shot. But with this book, we get to see this girl who ends up, being the girlfriend of this cop who's just a cop for the summer, and he's gonna give his badge back, and they end up in this rich house, and that house is now taken over by criminals, and that's the story. And honestly, you don't really get to the meat of the story until like the last 2 pages, which is why this issue is a little lower for me, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of potential in building blocks here that gave me enough for issue 2. Now, if issue 2 kind of does the same thing, I'll probably end up dropping the book, but I want to give it one more shot. Because I like the idea that this girl, who in the beginning of the story is the type of girl who would have died a long time ago in a horror story. She's kind of pervy, and, all she's talking about is sex in the beginning. But what's interesting, and again, that's the type of character that usually in the rules of horror would die first. But then you get to learn a little bit more about her, and she's intelligent, and she's talking about gender studies and stuff like that. And you kind of figure, okay, she's going to be the main character of this book. She's not your average final girl. And it looks like she's going to be a bit more than just the final girl here. And there's this mystical axe that has to do with something that I only know about because of the description and not really because of the book. You see it for a second in the book, but that's about it. So I do think it takes a while to get to the point, and I think it's more about the ambiance, and I don't know if I fell in love with the characters because of the ambiance. And I think this is a newer, oh no, this is Joe Hill who actually wrote it. I was going to say, I thought it was one of the TV writers who ended up writing it. But yeah, Joe Hill ended up writing this. But it's interesting to see that, again, it's kind of this slow burn. So I'm curious to see where this is going to end up going. And I wish it utilized the really interesting building blocks it had here with this first issue. But yeah, I'm going to give the second issue a shot. I like that this girl is going to hopefully fight these bad guys with an axe. That's cool. And the artwork is really good for this book. I really, again, like the tone that it gave. I enjoyed the small town feel to it. So I'm going to give Basketful of Heads issue 1 3 stars. Moving on to number 5, which is the last issue of Jughead's Time Police, issue 5. So this probably was the weakest issue of the series thus far. I don't know if it needed 5 issues, and I kind of felt that with this one. But overall, it's a fun book. We get to see many Jugheads, including brooding Riverdale Jughead, fight off evil Jughead. And then there's a lot of pages where Jughead goes back to the band and they do their battle of the band. I thought that could have been 2 pages. So it's kind of weirdly balanced, this issue, but overall it's fun. It's good artwork. If you want to, classic Archie, more in tone of comedy Archie, slice of life, read Jughead Time Police. I thought it was fun, but this was a weaker issue, and kind of wish it got to the point a little bit more or a little quicker than it did with this one. So overall, I'm going to give that 3 stars. Love seeing Derek Charm on an Archie book again, because it does bring that cool slice of life, but modern feel to Archie again. All right, moving on to number 4, which is DCeased, issue 6, and this is the last issue of DCeased. I'm not as gun-ho for this series as many other people for this book, but I liked the last chapter. I enjoyed some of the wow moments of deaths that we ended up seeing, and it's a fun post-apocalyptic book. Is it mind-blowing? Does it change the genre? No. But it's cool to see a lot of the character beats that they end up taking with this issue. Especially, Tom Taylor knows how to write Black Canary, and you get to see a lot of characters that have shined from Injustice shine in a different way with this book. So if you're an Injustice fan, I think you'll really enjoy this one. If you know nothing about the series, you might not have as much of a connection to it. I also don't love the artwork. I think it's a bit too gritty, so it prevents me from getting into the story, where you had Injustice, which was a lot more sleek artwork. But yeah, overall, it was a lot of fun. I liked the ending. I thought it was one of the better issues, and I think it's worth picking up just for the sake of character beats and some of the shocking moments that end up happening in this universe. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 4. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water, and then we're moving on to number 3. All right, moving on to number 3, which is Runaways, issue 26, which I thought was a really solid issue. It's the beginning of this new, well, I guess it's technically the second issue, but it's kind of the beginning of this whole J Squad superhero team that our Runaways are going to be a part of. And what I like is you don't trust this guy, but you want to trust this guy because he's just trying to go against the Pride. And it's cool to actually delve into the Pride again and go back to the history of Runaways. So I enjoyed that aspect, and you know, what the Runaways could be fighting for and how they somewhat become a superhero team. The part I don't trust is that you get to see little nods in this issue of like, okay, it looks like the people that are part of this team were kids at some point, because there's like a wing for girls and a wing for guys. And I think the leader, I forget his name, Doc Justice, wants our heroes to be heroes for a reason. Is he trying to relive those days of those heroes that ended up dying, and will this be kind of like part of his twisted plan? Because you can't trust adults in Runaways, and that's what I like, the setup to that. And now we do get to see our heroes actually become heroes in the end, so that was a lot of fun, and it's a good character building issue, but I do like the little pieces that are put together in this one. So Runaways issue 26 gets 4 stars. Oh, also another thing I enjoyed was Victor's geek out about the J Squad, and I like his reasoning of why he liked them. Is it the J Squad? No, J Team. I'm sorry. I like that his reasoning of why he liked the J Team instead of the Avengers or X-Men, because they felt like regular people, which is very much the Runaways. They're regular people that are kind of superheroes. So I like that aspect. So again, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 3. And also, artwork is splendid as always, and I love the emotions that Andres gives the book. All right, moving on to number 2, which is the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, issue 44. Very, very solid issue. I enjoyed this one, and I like how the pieces are coming together with this. So we get to see finally the Omega Rangers and Power Rangers come face to face after that devastating cliffhanger where you're like, oh my god, are the Power Rangers going to survive? What's going on here? So the Omega Rangers saved the day, which I kind of wonder how they knew that this was all happening. But one thing I was thinking about when the scene is playing out, I'm like, well, if Kimberly and Billy and Tommy end up hearing the Omega Ranger's voice, they're gonna obviously know it's their friends. So I love that one scene where they say absolutely nothing and they leave. So I'm like, all right, that's a good way to kind of get away with it in a really, really funny way. And then we get to see the Omega Rangers go up against Lord Zed, which usually don't get to see the Rangers go to the place of the villain. So I thought that was a really unique twist, because usually it's the villain saying, all right, I'm going to send my monster, and then I'm going to see ya. So it's cool that they're like, no, we're going to go to you, and we're going to fight you. So they're building up to a really cool Lord Zed Jason battle, which I'm really excited about. So, and then also you have the other Rangers who kind of feel like they suck, they failed, and they're like, are we over our heads? Do we admit that we're over our heads? Like, what do we do here? So there's a lot of interesting, subtle character building in this issue, and a lot of interesting building blocks for this. So definitely an issue you don't want to miss, because I feel like it's gonna in the next couple of issues blow up here into something bigger. So I thought this was really solid. So overall, I'm going to give Mighty Morphin Power Rangers issue 44 4 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, which is Invisible Woman, issue 4. I just really like this book. And honestly, Invisible Woman and Power Rangers were kind of matched this week. But what really brought it over the edge for me is just the drop-dead gorgeous artwork. And I do like the artwork of Power Rangers as well, in a different way. And I think it's, very kinetic and energetic as well. But I just haven't seen artwork in the way Invisible Woman does here. Like, one page here is that well, Sue is blind for half this issue, and then she explains how she's able to kind of see shapes, and I loved how you could kind of see the shapes here. I just loved the negative space that was utilized in this, and just look at that opener right there, the detail and the realism for the artwork. I just absolutely love the art, especially for this espionage book. It plays really well with her invisible skills, you know, with her power set. And this is a really good issue because we get to see Sue realize that her old partner is not a good person. You think, okay, we're going to see the generic twist where he actually is going to be a double agent, and he's not. He describes like he's always been this person, and the one thing that separates Sue and him is that he was willing to kill, and when she left, the more he killed, the easier it got. And then he ended up killing a kid. So that's why when someone asks him, hey, do you want to be a double agent? He's like, yeah, what do I got to lose? So I thought that was really interesting to see Sue have that point of view with Aiden. And by the end, Maria Hill screwing it all over because now these kids that she was supposed to save are not going to be saved. And Sue might be arrested because of all this because she had to play for the villain to save the kids. And I really like this cover where we get to see Sue with a gun. And again, one of the big points from this whole series is that Sue doesn't kill. So I like that we're kind of getting to the point of, will Sue kill to save these kids? So I'm curious to see where that one's going to go. I wish this series is talked about more. I really like it. I'm glad that Sue is getting the spotlight that she deserves in a book that spotlights her invisibility and actually uses that as a strength. So that was a really solid issue. Can't wait to see how that one concludes. Hopefully we get to see a sequel because I really enjoy this one. So I'm going to give that 4 stars, and that is my number 1 pick. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Let me know in the comments below what were your favorite comics and least favorite comics of the week. Go check out my Facebook, my Twitter, go check out my comics like Father Like Daughter and They Call Her the Dancer. And every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time is Comic Book Weekly, where we discuss our favorite comics and comic book news. So be sure to check that out as well. Thanks, guys.